relentlessly advancing through the frost hollow like some many-limbed, gibbering eldritch horror, casting an electronic screech onto every vox frequency that will take it. This is the unrelenting, skittering, and clawing thing of rebellion, 665.66 UHMA Chemrat Radio. Armed as always with what some say is an unhealthy amount of plasma weaponry and the willingness to slag first and never ask questions, I'm your host, Goblin King. Our misadventures tonight take us deep into the Underhive's own past, into the Forgotten Warrens of the Sump, all in search of those shiny Archaeotech gubbins. I'm guided, as always, by our very own infamous treasure hunter and rogue archaeo savant, Chac. And tell me, man, what exactly are we looking for down here this time?
Well, I came across this power claw, and it looks really old, and I heard the rest of the armor's hanging out down here, so I thought we'd do a little pokey and see what we turn up.
Just in case you need to open some doors with your power claws in the future?
Or a beer.
It's one way to open a can.
Or a heretic.
Is that a new brand of liquor? Welcome to episode 131, the Horus Heresy, Forces of the Great Crusade. More Black Library Horus Heresy books focus on the Legiones Astartes rather than the forces that fought alongside them. While they're mentioned, and a few books directly do detail the conflicts that are Space Marine free, it can be hard to realize the true scale of both the Great Crusade and the Heresy. Just to kind of lay it out, at its height, as the first events of the Heresy were starting to unfold, there were 4,287 primary expedition fleets engaged at the edge of the expanding territory of the Imperium of Man. An additional estimated 60,000 plus secondary deployment groups fought to enforce compliance or ensure imperial occupation on planets that had already been taken. And today, we aim to look at what made up those expeditionary fleets to paint a more complete picture of how vast this military actually is. Suffice to say, it wasn't just Space Marines. There's more there, guys.
Yeah.
Before we get started, though, do you want to watch us do this podcast? If you do, head on over to patreon.com/under the Hive of Madness right now and sign up to see our beautiful faces and help support us as we continue to develop the show. First impressions, before we even jump into the topic, it definitely can feel like the only people who fought in the Heresy were Space Marines.
Yeah. And that comes from the tabletop.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, because the tabletop, Space Marines are the flagship property of Games Workshop. Just look at the current Space Marine 2 video game. Just look at what models, if you're on the tabletop, get updated the most. What armies have the most units. And then if you go back to the actual Heresy battle, now you guys, especially if you're new to 40k, might not realize that Games Workshop has a 30k game, has a Horus Heresy game, and at both 32 millimeter, that's the big guys that you see in 40k, and at 8 millimeter, which are the small guys that I am working on right now. This is Horus Heresy, and the games have always started out focusing on Space Marines.
Oh, yeah, I mean, like the original epic Horus Heresy game was just called Space Marine.
It was just called Space Marine, and it came out. I've got it on a shelf back here someplace. It came with basically two armies that were, it was the same army, but they were pressed out in two different colors. I think mine, or at least I think I've only ever seen green and blue.
Green and blue. There you go. Yeah.
Green and blue were the two colors. So you didn't have to paint them, and you could have opposing forces on the field. And I still have a lot of ones that I've picked up on eBay that are based up and never painted, or they just painted a little bit. Not like they primed them and did nice stuff. They just like painted shoulder pads. Later, they came out in gray. But those are Space Marines, and they talked about you had 6 loyalist forces and 6 traitor forces, and it was just Space Marines. Before that, they had Adeptus Titanicus, the first one, and that was Titans. And this is where the whole idea of the heresy came from. In Rogue Trader, you had, they talked about a civil war, but they didn't really go into it, and chaos wasn't mentioned. It was none of that stuff. That's all grown up later.
It all kicked off with Epic. It all kicked off with what we call Epic. Technically, Epic, as Chac mentioned, was a couple of different board games. Chac and I broke all this down in a past episode. And then it really got expanded with the Horus Heresy card game, which was really, really popular around third edition. So like
Mhm.
right around the end of, 99, 2000. And a lot of that artwork became the basic Bible for what the
Yeah.
Black Library used to write the Horus Heresy book. So
Mm.
yeah, it makes sense that it's very Space Marine centric, but as it's been filled out and as it now applies to the full world, the modern world of 40k, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think a lot of it was implied originally. These are the forces that are fighting over this planet, but obviously people live here and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. Um, and now we've got a much deeper picture. And as we continue to talk about the Horus Heresy, it can definitely, even though we do mention some of the Tagmata forces, and even though we do mention some of the Imperial Army assets, it can definitely start to feel a little bit like all we're really talking about is different Space Marine battles. And there's a reason for that, but we just wanted to kind of take some time here to go through everything that's actually going on, because from a logistical standpoint, the Space Marines probably make up 10% ish of the fighting forces, maybe even less.
Oh,
What
much
would your
less than
gut
that.
feel to? Okay, what's your gut say?
Under 1%.
Yeah, I'm probably there too.
Um,
I did some really dirty math based on the size of hive cities at the height of the Great Crusade. One of the problems with a lot of this stuff is that a lot of the we're dealing with numbers that that we as people don't understand. First off, second off, we're dealing with a lot of like guesses at things, and a lot of times when a concept is introduced, such as a hive city, they just go, oh, it's a couple billion people. And then of course, 40 years goes by and the population of the planet reaches 7 billion and we don't have a single hive city yet. So then there kind of has to be a little bit of like numerical revisionism.
yeah. Okay, let's put it this way. Let's just do a little simple little math. Let's say
Yeah.
that all of the Space Marine legions were as big as like the Ultramarines.
Right.
300,000 Marines. And there are 18 of them. There were 20 at one point, but let's just go with 18. That's under 6 million Space Marines. You just go back up to some of the numbers you had before. 4,287 primary expedition fleets plus 60,000 secondary deployment groups. If you just go with the 60,000 out of 6 million, that's what? 100 Space Marines in every expedition group?
Yeah, exactly.
But you talk about how they like massed in just these huge amounts. And so it wasn't like that. So give you another idea, my current favorite Forge world, which I'm doing a whole army on, Titan Legion, Night House, and when the Legions Imperialis comes out with their Mechanicum, is Xanadu.
Mhm.
Okay, which turned heretic. It was always a little heretic, but it turned like hardcore for Horus. It was estimated before the heresy to bring it into compliance. If it did not come willingly, it would take one, maybe two full legions
Right.
to bring this one group of planets into compliance.
Right.
So that's 60,000 Space Marines out of 6 million. I mean, no, 600,000 Space Marines out of 6 million to bring one planet into compliance, which tells you that they had a lot of other units out there.
Yeah, there had to be been a lot of other guys.
Yeah, and they were talking about like 2 full Titan legions,
Yeah.
2 full Astartes legions, and this was for one planet. Now, you go across, and these days, the Space Marines have their own ships.
Yeah, and there's supposed to be about. I mean, well, and during we'll get into the expeditionary fleets, but during the compliance, they had their own ships too. But now it's every chapter has its own, and there's 1,000 chapters.
There are about 1,000 chapters.
There's about 1 million Space Marine, and of course, give or take
Yeah.
a couple 100,000 in existence. But yeah, yeah. The numbers are mind blowing. I think so. So Chac and I actually got into a conversation about this a while ago, and I had to kind of reverse engineer some of the numbers, because one of the things that you always see is like, oh well, there were a couple of million space. At the height of the Great Crusade, there were a couple million Space Marines. 200 million, 300 million Space Marines, and there were a couple billion Guard or a couple billion Imperial Army. And then like I went back and I looked at what the Imperial Tithe says and what the lore says. So the lore says that the average Hive city supports about 50 billion people in population. And most Hive worlds have about 9 hives on average. Now, depending on where you look, the reason I'm using averages is because depending on where you look, you'll get very, very different numbers. For instance, a hive has between 5 billion and 100 billion people, depending on what source you look at. So we went into the middle. Hive worlds have anywhere between like 4 or 5 hives and like 90 hives. We scaled that down and said 9 on average. And the reason we said 9 on average are the hive worlds that we know a lot about, Armageddon, Necromunda, stuff like that. They have about 9. So we're just trying to go with that. If we take the fact that at the height of the Great Crusade, before the heresy started, there were approximately 32,380 hive worlds in the Imperium. We get a hive world only, just hive worlds. We're not talking about frontier worlds, civilized worlds, death worlds, blah, 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 blah. We are only talking about hive worlds. We get an average population on hive worlds of 140.7 quadrillion people, which is that one above, that's two, so billion, trillion, quadrillion. So it's two above billion. That's just hive worlds. If 10% are inducted into the Imperial Army, which is the tithe, that means that 14.57 quadrillion soldiers are in the Imperial Army. Let's go ahead and keep going through that and say that only about 50% of the people inducted make it as a guardsman. Would you say that's about right? About 50% washout?
No, okay, so I can give you, we don't have to, because we actually have these numbers.
But the numbers are wrong, because the numbers are in the billions and the numbers wouldn't be in the billions.
No, they aren't. The numbers aren't in the billions.
Oh, you found better numbers?
Oh, yeah. Imperial Guard in 40K, there are 5 trillion members of the Imperial Guard.
Which is still way too low. That's what I'm saying. It's too low.
No, I don't think it is too low, because I think our numbers are too high that we're estimating. I think because I think what they're limited with, you could put all these numbers up, but I think they're limited with the logistics. So,
oh no, you're 100% right. It's 100% all-star, and that's why I think the numbers are too low. So I estimate that in 30K there were about 3.75 quadrillion guardsmen. And the reason that I came up with that number is one of the things that we know is that the average lifespan of a guardsman is about 15 minutes.
No, that is not right at all, and I can prove it's not right.
Well, I can pull up the book called 15 Minutes. I know you can,
but that is just that story, and it's talking about that one specific place. If you read the rest of the literature, there are plenty of examples of entire regiments retiring. So on single battle,
lifespan of a guardsman,
the average lifespan of a guardsman is probably about 80, 90 years. So overall, the 15 minutes has been taken out of context. They were simply talking about a new recruit coming into that battle was lasting like they had a guardsman say 15 minutes.
15 hours, but
15 hours. But that is not the average lifespan of a guardsman. Guardsmen go years without even seeing action.
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, and okay, so the reason that I don't think that number is necessarily inaccurate is at one point the average lifespan of the United States soldier was like 15 seconds. Which, if you think about it, is
when they're storming Normandy Beach, but
that's what Beach. That's why it's an average. It's an average of 1776 until I think that number was thrown out in 2000. Yeah. So that was an average of all conflicts between those, and that's again kind of like, I think what that 15 hours means is between 30K and 40K. The average is about 15 hours. You're right. The vast majority are going to fall well above that average. There's planetary defense forces that are never going to become guard, that are never going to see combat at all. And but at the same time, there's entire planets that are wiped off in seconds.
Well, yeah, but they're planets that they live. Anyway, we're getting out of. Basically, there are a lot of forces. Let's just say
the only number that has been released is 15 hours, and whether or not, and that is an anthology of stories. So whether or not that's super accurate, we don't know. But again, if we assume just based on how big the Imperium is, and I think the reason that the number is there are hundreds of billions of guardsmen in 40k is because nobody knows.
Yeah, nobody knows, but the official number
yeah,
is 5 trillion or 50 trillion.
Yeah, it's got to be, and I would say it's got to be. I would put it in the low quadrillions, probably in the 30k. In 40k, I would say it's lower, and the reason I would say in 40k it's lower is because 40k is a lot more fractured than 30k was. 30k was, they refer to the Great Crusade and 30k as being the second age, golden age of technology. So like Earth was healing. Like there was a bunch of stuff that was happening that just said, no, humanity is winning. In 40k, humanity has been losing for 10,000 years. So there's definitely going to be a huge number disparity.
Yeah.
But it's just to throw that, to logistically look at it, we're talking about hundreds of trillions at the least.
Yeah. I just like the number that Lexiconum gives, and when they say untold billions upon billions. Right. I think we can just leave it with that. And yeah, I do see, a quick Google will give you population of the Imperium is like up to 18.7 quadrillion people.
Yeah. Well, but again, if you take an average of the population of hive worlds multiplied by hive worlds, you get 147.5 quadrillion. So it's just, and that's just one type of world, and it's an average. So maybe most of those hive worlds only have a hive on them, but we know that a hive world like Terra has like 98 hives on it. So like it's what realistically is happening here is that once you get out of the like low 100,000s, none of these numbers mean anything to our brains anymore.
So I think you just need to go with billions upon billions and just leave it at that. And as it said, nobody knows how many guardsmen there are. The Astra Militarum.
Technically, billions upon billions could mean anything from a billion up, right?
Yeah,
because it just means that there's billions. There are multiples of billions, so it could be quadrillion, it could be sextillions, it could be 7 tillions, whatever it is. But yeah, so just kind of like we're talking about. I think at the height of it, if you took the absolute best case scenario, if you took the top population of every legion and put them all into the same year and just made the blanket
it would be about 6
statement,
million.
It would be 250,000 per, right?
Yeah. Ultramarines went up to like 300,000, but they were an outlier. So do 250,000 times 18 is 4.5 million.
Right. So just picture it in just picture in your head. And we're not even talking about, we haven't talked about the mechanic. There's a bunch of stuff we're going to talk about, but just at the very least, it's 4.5 million versus hundreds of billions. So it breaks down. But anyway, so we tried to go back and we tried to rebuild some of this stuff and tried to give you guys better numbers. So we're going to jump in and talk about the expeditionary fleets. So during the Great Crusade, the forces of the Emperor were organized into several different formations known as expeditionary fleets. This is also something that's kind of used in modern 40k, so just keep that in mind. It all started with one fleet, the Principia
Imperialis.
Yes, the principal imperial unit, the Principia Imperialis, which was commanded by the emperor himself. But as the Crusades spread across the galaxy, more and more fleets were launched to match the exponentially expanding needs of the Great Crusade. Each time, a trusted and powerful general was appointed to lead these new fleets. As the Crusade moved on and after the discovery of several of the Primarchs in its early stages, the imperial fleets were divided into 3 main spearheads. These were the first, which was commanded by Horus, the second, which was commanded by Ferrus Manus, and the third, which continued to be manned or commanded by the emperor himself. So that they could be effectively supported and their movements across the galaxy tracked accurately, each expeditionary fleet was designated a number by the War Council on Terra. And as we mentioned up top, by the early days of the 31st millennium, around 203 standard years after it began, again, the Great Crusade, 203 years long before the heresy even starts, there were there were 4,287 primary expedition fleets. There were 60,000 plus secondary deployment groups. So these are secondary expeditionary fleets. And there were 372 expedition fleets that were regrouping or retrofitting or refitting in Sol system or in other major imperial hubs or star systems to resupply and await new orders. So it's really closer to 4,600 primary fleets because there's that 372 essentially in like regroup and reserve.
Yeah. It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot of boats. And we don't have numbers. The composition of each of these fleets was not standardized. The fleet groups, Imperial Army regiments, auxiliary troop formations, and even Space Marine legions that made up a fleet could come and go over time as the strategy or tactical needs dictated. However, the designation numbers remained, and which most never held any particular significance. Some became famously associated with specific primarchs or other prestigious leaders of the Imperium. For example, Horus's group was the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet, and Angron's was the Bloody 13th Expeditionary Fleet. So they were launched sequentially. However, the Bloody 13th was launched before Angron was involved. That's why it's the 13th Expeditionary Fleet. When he took over, stuff changed. So like kind of keep that in mind. Like the Horus was the first Primarch discovered, but he isn't the second Expeditionary Fleet because by the time he was discovered, the Emperor had to launch 62 others other than number one. It kind of keep that in mind. The numerical designation of the Expeditionary Fleet was also applied to worlds conquered by those forces. For example, the Imperial world, initially known as 6319, was the 19th world discovered by War Master Horus's 63rd expedition. This way, it became possible for the Imperium's administrators to plot the movements of a specific fleet by the worlds it encountered in chronological order. 6319 is a very famous world, by the way. If you've read the first couple of books of the Horus Heresy, you'll be familiar with 6319. If you haven't, go read the first couple of Black Library books, and it'll snap into focus. While all the original expeditionary fleets had been assembled in Terran space by the Mechanicum, by the height of the Great Crusade, they had been dispersed throughout the Milky Way galaxy. Each was working to reunite all the human-settled colonies under the Emperor's rule, fulfilling his dreams of uniting humanity to dominate the stars. The expeditionary fleets were given a broad remit to bring human-settled worlds into the Imperium by diplomacy if possible, but by force if necessary, and to cleanse any xeno species from the galaxy that represented a threat to humanity. And really kind of want to point that out. At this point, it is not genocide on xenocide. It's not xenocide on sight, is a better way to say that. It's literally, if they're a threat, deal with them.
Yeah.
And, you kind of brought this up earlier, but to just kind of reinforce it, the expeditionary fleets are founded in Terra, in the Terran Sol system, so that 4,600 some odd, all formed in and around Terra. Those 60,000 others, 60,000 plus others we mentioned, those are expeditionary fleets that are made, the secondary ones, they're made by splitting the main expeditionary fleets into smaller ones. Or, like if you roll into a heavy Mechanicum system, right? And they've got a huge fleet, that huge fleet joins your expeditionary force, but that huge fleet doesn't go back to Terra. You just make a secondary expeditionary fleet and send it out. You're like, oh, I just gained 100,000 ships in this heavy Mechanicum system. Go me.
There must be no asteroids left in the Sol system. It has to be completely mined out.
100%. I mean, I think
and the fact that they were
that.
they built all of this within the course of 200 years.
Oh yeah. Well, so they
Some
found
were
a lot.
already
They
built.
found a lot of it. Now we've mentioned Arc Mechanicus in the past, and Arc Mechanicus are just absolutely mind-bogglingly large ships.
They're forge worlds that travel.
Yeah, and a lot of them were found and then sent back to Terra sent back to Sol System, sent back to Mars. Yeah, and yeah, exactly. It's they're finding stuff as they're expanding,
Yeah.
essentially. But yeah, the Jupiter shipwrights and the Saturnian, not the Genovian shipwrights, there we go, and the Saturnian shipwrights definitely were busy.
Yes.
Crank them out, man. As we just sort of mentioned, almost all intelligent alien species that were encountered by mankind had proved hostile,
Yeah.
however, and eventually outright genocide became the expected remedy, right? You know, if it's a hammer, or wait, I'm a hammer, so everything's a
It
nail,
looks like yeah.
right?
It
Right.
it's I think all alien species were, hostile by
Yeah.
default.
Well, it's the dark, you know, the Fermi paradox is a
Yeah.
thing that we have in real life in physics, where we talk about like why haven't we seen any other species? And there's a bunch of theories. The Great Filter is one of them, but one of them is the dark forest, and 40k is the dark forest. The dark forest essentially says the reason that we haven't seen any alien species in the galaxy is because everybody is like a hunter in a dark forest. As soon as you make a noise, you step on a branch, shoot your gun, turn on your flashlight, all of the other hunters are going to know where you are and they're going to essentially try to kill you
Send
because
out a
you're
satellite with a map to your home system.
right, right. Yeah, exactly. We've made some great decisions. But anyway, the 40k universe definitely paints the dark forest hypothesis as being the correct. Every single time we find an alien species, the alien species is like, everybody tries to kill us. We're going to try to kill you.
Yeah.
With minor exceptions. The fleets were also tasked with exploring galactic wildernesses following the terrible anarchy of the Age of Strife, so that new frontiers could be opened for human settlement and resource extraction in formerly untouched regions of space. During the Age of Strife, so before the Age of Strife started, before the birth pangs of Slaanesh cut the galaxy apart and basically created all these tiny pocket empires, before She Who Thirsts was actually born, there was essentially a great age of expansion that ended with the Men of Iron, which are the AI constructs, the Men of Stone and the Men of Iron. The Men of Iron being the AI constructs, the Men of Stone probably being heavily cybernized humans that were able to like essentially like whatever existed, whatever cybernetic implants the Mechanicum is known for being used to make Space Marines is kind of how I read Men of Stone. Would you agree?
I thought they were a lesser form of AI
Okay,
myself.
I've always taken it more as like cybernetics
It's
slash bionics.
either one of us could be right
Yeah,
because it's
because there's
not
no information.
there's no information. I thought you got like the Men of Stone and then the Men of Iron, and the Men of Iron were just
Well,
advanced.
like super, like more advanced. I could see that. I could see that.
That's how I read it, but there's literally no information.
Yeah.
So
But these guys went out and they conquered and colonized huge chunks. And this is the reason I think they're Mechanicum cybernetics, because one of the things that was found during the Great Crusade was all of these either Forge worlds or Forge world like places, essentially. You know what I mean?
well, what happened during the age of strife? So after the dark age of technology, so when we're on the sort of the
The downturn.
downswing,
Yeah.
um, what Mars did is it's like Mars didn't have navigators
Yeah.
and the warp storms were really bad. And Mars basically said, fuck it. And let's yeet an expeditionary force out. And what they
Yeah.
did
Just
is,
colony ship it.
yeah, it was a colony ship. And they sent them out and they said, good luck.
Yep.
And they didn't know how many survived. Some survived well, some did not survive at all. Then there are also basically remnants of Forge Worlds from the dark age of technology. So, okay, I already talked about Xana, but let me go back to it to mention this. So there's these rumors about this advanced Forge World, and when it was finally contacted, the rogue trader that found them was presented by 3 automated warships. What does the Mechanicum not have?
Yeah.
Automated sentient warships.
It's a big no because of
Yeah.
the Men of Iron.
And they
And
didn't say
yeah.
that they're sentient, but there weren't any people on them, and they hailed the rogue trader and took them back to Xana for a refit, where you saw all these huge cybernetic armies. So obviously, this was either a But they were from Mars. They came out during the Age of Strife, but they obviously their level of technology either survived much better or advanced. And this is not the only sort of advanced civilization. Another good one that's in the Heresy a lot is the place where the cursed dagger came from. The Empire begins with an I.
Um, not
Intertrex.
Intertrex, yeah, the
Intertrex.
Intertrex.
They were a very advanced society.
Yes. And they were actually they had 2 or 3, they only really detail 1, but they had 2 or 3 like subjugated Xeno species that were
Yes.
part of their
Yeah,
empire.
they had the super gorillas.
Yeah, they had the super gorillas, and then the mecha arachnid were subjugated. They weren't part of their empire, but they were subjugated by them. They were basically like on a, if you want to say, like a private reserve. Uh,
Oh,
Yeah.
I read that differently. Not subjugated. I read that they were just like they put up signs saying "Here be monsters," and then
they
when
yeah.
the Imperium went down, they were like, "We warned you."
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what it was. But it was more like a game preserve,
Oh, I
like a
didn't know they were doing
wilderness
anything. I thought
area.
they were just like, "We can't conquer these guys, so we're going to put up warning signs."
I think they conquered all of their planets except one. If I remember, and again, I think Chalk and I both read these books probably like 10, 15 years ago. But if I remember correctly, they basically were like, we can't exterminate we feel bad to exterminate an entire species, so we're going to leave them one planet.
Oh, I thought they
But
couldn't
that could be.
exterminate that one planet. Then that's what was
Okay.
left.
I
And then
wonder,
when the Space Marines went down to fight the spiders, they got eaten.
Yeah,
That's how I remember it.
and then the Space Marines weren't able to defeat that one planet either.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so what you were talking about with Xana and a couple of other things is one of the reasons that I think the Men of Stone are supposed to be more like super Mechanicum people.
Yeah, it
Because
could be.
yeah, but yeah. So anyway, the Emperor essentially during all of this time, but past the Age of Strife, all this stuff, the Emperor hoped that most of the human civilizations would willingly accept reunification. Age of Strife is over. You can communicate, you can get out again. Everybody reunite with the Imperium. Let's become one big happy family. He knew that many human worlds would forcefully reject Imperial compliance, however, and to react to this potentiality or this possibility, each expeditionary fleet was a potent military armada under the command of a high-ranking officer of the Imperial Army. Each bore the rank Lord Commander, and the expedition's naval fleet elements were commanded by an officer with the rank of Master of the Fleet. So the Lord Commander is in charge of the expeditionary fleet. Underneath him directly, the guy in charge of the boats is the Master of the Fleet. So
Right.
like the Lord Commander is in charge of the ground troops too. The Master of the Fleet is so it's a little weird. Additionally, each of the Emperor's Primarchs was given command of an unusually large expeditionary fleet. Attached to this fleet was the main body of their Space Marine Legion, increased naval support because of more boats, and then of course more Imperial Army assets because each Space Marine Legion had its own speciality. So they had their own assets that they specifically required. These expeditionary fleets, which were quite rare since most of the Great Crusade's fleets possessed no Astartes contingent, were usually tasked as major spearheads into entirely new areas of the galaxy. Smaller fleets with less combat capability would then follow in a significant fleet's wake. So essentially, you get your support fleets coming up next, branching off to ensure Imperial compliance on worlds that presented less human or Xenos resistance than those faced by the fleets carrying Astartes complements. Primarchs of several of the legions would sometimes split off smaller units of Space Marines from their main fleet to accompany expeditionary fleets that were in need of Space Marine support. In most of these situations, the ranking Space Marine officer served as the fleet's Lord Commander, since Astartes always assumed command over ordinary troops in a military situation during the Great Crusade. This changed during the Heresy. There were Imperial commanders, there were Lord Commanders that commanded respect from Primarchs to a point where even if a Primarch joined that battalion, that expeditionary group, they wouldn't take command from the Lord Commander.
Yeah.
An example of this is Loretta Sorn, the Imperial commander, Lord Commander of the Conqueror, which is Angron's warship.
Yeah.
So she's an example of like sometimes Primarchs listen to the Imperial
That's
army
just
officer.
because she was hot.
Yes, it's because she told him no.
That's hot.
It's because he stomped onto her bridge and she was like, "Who the fuck are you? Do you pay bills on this ship?" Yeah, because being told no, I got it. I got you.
Back when I think
Yeah.
Bricky Station is off the air, but they had a serious simp going for her.
Really?
Oh yeah, they drew up a whole bunch of
Fan art?
semi-safe for work posters featuring her
Yes.
and I believe her abs, what they always said.
Yeah, and then she has that red bloody handprint on her chest. I think it's is it Angron's hand or Karn's handprint? I
I don't
can't
remember.
remember.
Anyway, she's melded to the ship now and is a half
Yeah,
demon, half
she's a
ship.
demon. Yeah. It when you go down that path sometimes.
I was going to say something that was entirely inappropriate, so let's just move on.
So, wow. I kind of want to know. So the first and probably like not notorious, not infamous, the most famous force of the expeditionary fleets, obviously, were the Primarchs and their legions.
Yeah.
During the Great Crusade and into the Heresy, there were 18 active legions, each with operated between 10,000 and 250,000 troops. This is kind of where we're already going to start breaking into these. This force organization is so big, it's hard to track what's actually there. And this is the smallest group. Like Chac said, probably I would say I said 10% as a gut, but now that I think about it, I think you're right. I think it's like 2%. 2% of the military is probably these guys.
So, and when you, and a way to think of their force structure, if you go by the Principia Bellicosa or whatever it
Right.
was.
Yeah, the Principia.
So each of the Space Marine legions is broken up into a series of companies,
Mhm.
and each of those companies basically corresponds to a chapter in 40k. A company is 1,000 men. Matter of fact, some of the famous companies became at the end of the heresy became chapters. Like the 22nd Nemesis company became the Nemesis Space Marines chapter from the Ultramarine. Think about that. They're basically broken up into they're basically a whole bunch of chapters put together. We call them companies. And then you could have multiple companies. The Iron Warriors had these grand battalions
Right.
that were composed of a series of companies. Each of those companies is basically a Space Marine chapter.
Right. Yeah. When we get into M32, we're going to start talking about like some of these second founding companies and at that point it gets a little wait, what? But yeah, exactly.
It's just a good way of thinking about the size because if you're coming from 40k, you're used to dealing with a chapter.
Right, which is 1,000 Marines.
And that's what and a company was 1,000.
1,000 Marines, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like first company was usually the tactical dreadnought armor company, which I'm not saying dreadnoughts, I'm saying Terminators. That Terminators were tactical dreadnought armor.
Yeah.
And that was usually first company. So that's why now so in the chapter structure, that's continued. First company, which is now 100 Marines in the chapter, is usually anyway. So Space Marines were frontline forces of shock troops armed with some of the best war gear the Imperium had on hand. As they often served in leadership roles and clearly defined the heresy itself, we've discussed most of them up till this point. There are very few legions that we have not talked about at least a little bit in our Horus Heresy coverage. To give you guys all an idea, it is said that around 100 Space Marines could quell a rebellious city. Thousands could conquer a world over the course of several days. I'm taking this to mean a week, but it says a several. And tens of thousands wielded at once were the doom of an entire species, reducing an alien civilization to dust and memory in just about a year. So all of these being Terran standard. So 100 could quell a rebellious city in a couple of hours. 1,000 can conquer a world in about 7 days. And Tens of thousands could wipe out an alien species in a year. So that gives you kind of the power
Except
level.
when several 100,000 Space Marines die going against a Xeno species, or
What? No, that we wiped that entire legion. It doesn't exist anymore. And we don't talk about those, okay? I mean, we'll have our own episode on them, but
so they
strike
give
that from
these
the record,
numbers,
sir.
but then when you actually read the books or look into the lore, there are times where
Massive
hundreds of
amounts just
thousands of
die.
Marines
Yeah.
are tasked with quelling a planet and are mired down there for months.
And yeah, and like yeah, and or just disappear, overnight
Yeah.
disappear.
So, like, was it in this one, or was it in the? No, it was in this where I talked about back to Xana too, because we've already brought this up, where it was estimated that 1 to 2 legions plus 1 to 2 Titan legions would be needed to bring this Mechanicum Forge world into compliance if it didn't come
Right.
voluntarily. That is, I don't know, up to 500,000 Space Marines, and God knows how many God engines are in a
Yeah.
Titan
yeah.
Legio. So it just really depends. There were some tougher nuts to crack.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, and again, we're like everything we can find is kind of the average. And now the famous. Now I read you guys the lore. The famous argument that happens all the time is that 5 Space Marines can take a civilized world. And we've talked about it on the podcast. If it was the Alpha Legion and you're talking about like 25 years of underground operations, sure, I buy your argument. If you're talking about a straight balls to the wall fight, 5 guys are going to die. It's the zombie movie. It is literally a zombie movie.
I mean,
at a certain point, there are billions of people on that world, and there's only 5 of you.
no, Earth at its current technological level has the technology to take out Space Marines.
Yes. Oh yeah, 100%. In fact,
And if 5 Space Marines could decapitate a government.
Oh yeah.
I mean, teleport, 5 Terminators teleporting into the middle of the Capitol of the Senate, you take out all, we could decapitate most of the of a government. You still might have military installations and all.
Well,
but they aren't invulnerable. They would die eventually.
And the other thing to keep in mind is that most modern governments on our current planet have continuity of government plans. So if something does happen like that, there is chunks of the government that aren't involved. And yeah, at the as Chuck, you'd be really interested to see what a 500-pound firebomb does to ceramite, and I imagine it's slag it to the ground.
Yeah. Well, a 30 millimeter anti-tank round to the head of a Space Marine would take the head off.
Yeah, exactly. Would they do a lot of
damage? They're not invulnerable, but that's the whole thing. That's why we're talking about the other forces.
Absolutely,
because Space Marines are not there to pacify or garrison a planet.
Right. If we just go with the word usage, they are Space Marines. And Marine, the term Marine, both from where the United States got it and as the United States uses it, the United States got it from the British Empire. Marines were shock troops on boats used to land and take a beach.
Yeah.
Not
Army
hold a
holds
beach. Yep. Yeah. The Army holds it. So the Marines are a beachhead force. And that goes, again, it goes back to the British Empire. They take the beach and then they leave. They're done. That's their entire job. Their job is to take. Their job is not to hold. Their job is not to make an empire. Their job is not to colonize. Their job is to take. And as soon as you've taken it, as soon as you've taken an emplacement, you have to, as Chalk just said, the Army's job is to hold it. And that's exactly how the Space Marines operate. And if you look at a large conflict like World War II, the storming of the beaches, the famous one being Normandy. Yeah, there's a lot of Marines and there's a lot of Army there, and there's Army behind enemy lines as far as like the paratroopers and everything go. There's a lot of stuff going on in that conflict, but that strike force, that first strike force, their job is to constantly move. Their job is not to clean up. Their job is not to worry about the flanks. Their job is not to worry about retaliation. Their job is just to move.
Yeah.
That's their entire job. Go forward and break things. And
Yeah,
that's what the Space Marines are.
Yeah, they're basically a very large special operations command.
Yes.
They go in and perform tactical assaults, and then they leave.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
And that's in 30K when there were more of them.
Yeah.
Now in 40K, they are like the elite of the elites.
Now,
There
there
are
were
very
some
few.
times when it's basically ends up being in 30K, there were some battles that were basically Space Marine versus Space Marine, tanks versus tank, God Machine versus God Machine. And if you were a guardsman, you were dead. If you were Solar
pity you.
Auxiliary,
Yeah.
Auxilia, you were probably dead. Even though, and we will get to the Solar Auxilia, they were almost Space Marine level.
But before we get to the Auxilia, let's talk about the Mechanicum. So the Emperor's first goal in reunifying mankind was ensuring cooperation with the Mechanicum. The empire of tech priests of the cult Mechanicus on Mars had historically been fiercely independent of Earth. We don't know why. This again goes back to that kind of hazy time when there's not a lot of definition. Instead of outright war, the Emperor used the threat of assault by his space marines on Mars before sweetening the deal by offering new technologies to form an alliance. So he carried it and sticked. He sticked and then he carried it. So again, he sweetened the deal with new technologies specifically because he wanted to form an alliance. This alliance would become the heart of a newborn Imperium of Man and is symbolized by the adoption of the two-headed eagle or aquila even into modern 40K. So I believe the eagle with the eye represents the Imperium, always looking forward, and the blinded eagle looking back represents the Mechanicum, always sticking to tradition. I believe that's the way the Aquila breaks down.
I thought,
I mean, this is really easy.
I know, I'm just looking it up right now.
Okay. I'm going to leave it to you. Despite his disdain for their religion and cybernetic augmentation of their bodies, the Emperor knew he needed Mars's great manufactura, mechanical output, and ancient technological knowledge to build the military force required to reunify all of humanity. The tech priests of Mars saw the Emperor as extraordinarily scientifically knowledgeable and recognized that his technological skill was proof that he was above ordinary people. They essentially believed that he was their omnissiah, which is part of their religion, the living avatar of their machine god in the material realm, who the creed of the cult Mechanicus had promised would return one day to the red planet and offer the true way forward for humanity. So this kind of worked out in a bunch of different ways. First off, big threat. Second off, technology. Third off, oh, this guy might be our god. And then boom, Treaty of Mars. And did you look up what the official Aquila meant?
I can't find it anywhere. People say the blindfolded head represents something about looking into the past and the eye looking toward the future.
Yeah, I just can't remember. I want to say the eye looking towards the future represents the Imperium, and the blindfolded eye represents the Mechanicum, because the Mechanicum looks to tradition.
Okay,
and the
so
Imperium,
this one,
during 30K, the Imperium looked towards the future.
Yeah, and after the heresy, it was the
well, now it's just a symbol that they've been using forever, and they don't know why.
They say after it represents the Imperium and the Adept and the Mechanicus, but before it was just the past and then looking towards the future.
And that the symbol before the Aquila, before the Treaty of Mars and before the Aquila, was actually a one-headed eagle on top of two thunderbolts. And the only legion of the Legiones Astartes that continues to use that symbol is the White Scars.
Yeah.
During the Great Crusade and Heresy, the Mechanicum would become fractured into the Dark Mechanicum and what is now known as the Adeptus Mechanicus during the Schism of Mars. However, each side maintained the three-branch military organization throughout the galaxy-spanning civil conflict. These were the Collegia Titanica, the Scutari, and the Tagmata Omnissiah. If you're new
to Warhammer 30K and 40K, there are two things that sound a lot alike. There are the Mechanicum and the Mechanicus.
Yes.
The Mechanicum was the pre-heresy group.
Yeah.
The Mechanicus is used after it, and it has to deal with the cult Mechanicus. And now you have the Adeptus Mechanicus.
Essentially, during the Schism of Mars, the Dark Mechanicum won and took over the planet. and they kept the name Mechanicum. And the the cult of the Mechanicus became the Adeptus Mechanicus,
Right.
which
And
is
they
the
worship
good
the
guys.
emperor as the omniscient. That's why it's a cult. So you had the cult
Yes.
Mechanicus, and they became the Adeptus Mechanicus. So if it's when you're talking 30K, it's still Mechanicum, either Mechanicum or Dark Mechanicum. 40K, it's Adeptus Mechanicus or it's
Dark
or
Mechanicum.
Dark Mechanicum.
And the reason that there's Mechanicum and Dark Mechanicum is because technically Mechanicum is the name before the Schism of
Yeah.
Mars. Yeah.
So they're both trying to claim the same name, and it wasn't until after the heresy that they really broke it off and went to and changed it. That like you have the Adeptus Ministorum,
Yes. Yeah.
and also they became the Adeptus.
Everybody has an Adepta.
Yeah.
It
It just means department, basically, or the adepts, the people of something like that.
The legions of the Divisio Materialis comprise the main military force of the Collegia Titanica. Each was a self-sufficient unit, including its own precepts and moderati, ground combat troops and support staff in addition to its titans. Each legion was based on its own forge world, with most forge worlds having at least a single titan legion. Very important that you hear that.
Yeah,
at least one. More often than not, way more than one.
Okay, so you had, for those of you who don't know Titans or haven't played like Adeptus Titanicus or read the books, the Princeps is the captain. He is directly wired into the Titan, the God engine.
Into the throne.
Into the throne. He can sometimes leave, but not always. The Moderati is like the second in command, but you can have more than one. They are wired in, but can also leave. Then you also have, these things are huge. You don't just have two people running them. Then you have like a bunch of other people that are wired into, like, depending on the size.
It's usually one, as far as, and this is totally an average. It's one precept, two moderati. There's like 5 like tech priests. Then there's like 5 security guys, and then there's servitors.
Yeah, but that could, like, I don't know if that's the same for like a warhound.
Yeah, no, a warhound is only a precept and 2 moderati. There's only 3 crew. But
and then they also have,
I guess there's 5 crew because their gun, that each gun is a servitor.
And then you also have this, is it the Secutari, which are the ground combat troops that like provide security, because a Titan can still be mobbed by a bunch of infantry and taken down. Because its guns aren't really designed to take down infantry.
It's designed to take down city. I mean, like, a Titan can flatten a city.
Yeah.
A Titan can delete a chapter of Marines on its own. Like, they're not designed for small arms combat.
Well, you know, a warhound is a sneaky boy. It's only like
50 meters tall.
I don't think it's 50 meters. They're big, but they're not that big. They sneak around the ruins. They're the scout titans.
Then they are 10.5 inches tall. They are 17 meters, so approximately 56 feet tall.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're talking like a 6-story building.
Yeah, they're sneaky boys.
Sneaking around. But really important to remember, there are ground troops here. We don't have numbers on the ground troops, but you know, if you imagine, I would imagine that each warhound probably has 2 tanks. So the next class up is probably going to have 4 tanks. And then if it's got 2 tanks, it's got what, 50 soldiers. So if it's got 4, you know, just kind of play around with the fact that there's more stuff than just the Titan.
Yeah. And they're probably out there with they're being screened by their vassal knight houses and all that also.
Which we'll get into the knights here in a minute. As we mentioned, a few of the Forge Worlds had way more than one legion. And a legion's strength was typically around 50 operational engines. That's not total engines, that's operational engines.
And they were also classed at different levels. You had like Primaris legions.
Yeah, we'll list them all off here in a second.
You're like, that's going back to Xana. That's the reason why they thought it'd be so bad, because it had a Primaris legion.
Right.
Which was like the same thing that Mars had.
Right.
Right? It was at the same level, except Mars has 3.
Titans are split into 3 major categories, but each major category has like a ridiculous number. So there's scout class. We'll jump into it.
Oh no, this isn't classes. I was just talking about how the overall legion is class, like the size of the overall legion, not the classes within it.
There's 3 sizes. There's scouts, there are imperial class, and there are emperor class. And then technically there's the 4th class, and I cannot remember what they're called because there's only like one of them, and they're essentially they're not. Maybe they're the Primaris class. But yeah, there's only one of them.
No, you miss.
What's the giant?
You're talking about the classes of the actual Titans. I'm talking about the classes of the overall Legio that contains all of those.
Oh, yeah.
So like Mars had 3 talk about first level Titan legions because of their size and complexity. Other smaller Forge worlds might have like a secondary level Titan legion that has like fewer engines in it, but they still might have all these different classes or only some of the classes.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was hearing. I get what you're saying. So we've got an entire episode probably series dedicated to Collegia Titanica coming, and what Chac is talking about will definitely be because we are skimming the surface with Collegia Titanica.
Yeah.
The Titan legions are huge.
Yeah.
Massive. And like battle losses could take centuries to replace, and a new Titan could take 50 years to construct. So if you lose half of your legion, it could take 200 years to replace it easily. And this all gets into, what do they have in reserve? Why do they have it in reserve? What class is it? Which Forge world is it on? All of that stuff. Moving them around. There could be mothballed ones on one Forge world, which now have to be moved to Mars. And that it happens.
Yeah. And then there were, we're going to cover the different classes here, but then there were also ones that some Forge worlds had these oddball ones because they had surviving technology or they had Xenos tech worked into them or all sorts of things.
What the hell were those called? They have their own class.
The giant one that was sentient, that was had an AI.
Is it a Dominator class?
Something like that. There was only like one of them that's ever been found, and it fell to chaos.
But they essentially, just like they have Arc Mechanicus, they have like Arc Titanicus, if you want to say. There's only one that we're recalling right now, but I want to say there were like 2 of them. There may have been 2 of them. There's one really famous one, and then there's a couple of like, this might be one, but we don't know. The Titans are split into 3 different classes, and we'll start with the Scout Titan, which is split. There's the Warhound Scout Titan, the Rapier Scout Titan, and the Dire Wolf Heavy Scout Titan. And those are all Warhound size.
Yeah.
That's the smallest one. We just mentioned it's like 56 feet tall.
And it is the only Titan that you can play in full size
in 40K.
That is, you can actually go on the Warhammer app, Army Construction app, and add it in. It costs like 1,000 points, maybe a little bit more.
I think are they 1,000 now? I thought they were 650.
650, maybe 800. No, it might be 1,000.
I guarantee you that army is now broken because I had one in one of my armies.
So it is about.
It's 10.5 inches tall.
Is it only 10.5? Okay.
10 points. Maybe it's 10.75. Maybe it's 10 3/4.
Because they are bigger than they're bigger than Imperial Knights, but not hugely bigger than Imperial.
Yeah, they're not that much bigger. If I can remember, I will try to take a picture of my Warhound next to my Genestealer Knight. I have to dig my Warhound out, but I've got a Warhound. I
was looking to see if I have a foot here. Hold on.
Yeah, the feet are pretty big. The feet are huge.
No, I put it away someplace, but I was printing one, and I'm like, why am I doing this? This is taking a lot of time and crap.
I have to get new weapons for my Titan, but I'll try to stick my Warhound Titan together with some blue tack and share some pictures over on our Discord. You should join our Discord if you're listening right now. So next up is the Imperial.
You don't have to
class.
pay us money. Just join the Discord and then pay us money.
Then pay us money. Jinx. Love it. The Imperial class is the next class is the Imperial class, and that is made up of the Apocalypse, Castigator, Komodo, Carnivore, Mirage, Nemesis, Punisher, Executor, Reaver, Warbringer Nemesis, Warlord Battle, War Master, and Siege Titans.
And I've not heard of all of these.
Yeah, some of these are like one-offs.
They
Most
were like
people
mentioned in a book or something like that.
Most people are familiar with the Reaver. Most
The
people are
Reaver,
familiar with the Nemesis.
Warbringer, the Nemesis, the Warlord, the War Master.
The Apocalypse is the largest of the Imperial class ones. So Apocalypse, some people have heard of. The last one is the Emperor class. And there are 2 Emperor class Titans. There's the Imperator and the Warmonger. And he might have some. Do you have an Imperator and a Warbringer or a Warmonger?
These are from the original epic scale.
Okay. And
this is an Imperator. This is the one that they've called the Walking Church.
The Imperator is the one that's got like the cathedral on its shoulders.
Yeah. And sorry about the sort of bad primed paint job. And this one, I don't have his head on him.
And if you're listening to us and you're wondering what we're talking about, you can go over to Patreon right now and see.
This is a Warmonger. It's basically the same size, but its church has more guns.
Yeah.
And it has a landing pad for a scout flyer.
Yeah, they're I mean, the Emperor class Titans are the crazy ones, and they're huge. And again, like these are civilization ending, city ending Titan.
Yeah. So
not
if
Titans.
You do these in 40K scale, people have printed them. They're like 7 feet tall.
Yeah, they're nuts. I know a couple of people who are kit bashing them out of like existing kits, and like the number of official Imperial or official Games Workshop like battlefield kits, terrain kits that are being used is insane. Every Titan Legion is divided into several mana pools, each commanded by a Precept Senioris and comprising around 5 Titans. There were countless mana pool variations, but the most common is known as the Axiom, which consisted of a Warlord Titan leader, a pair of Reavers for support, and a pack of 2 Warhounds for scouting. And of course, again, we said that each Legion had about 50 they could field, so they could field this or some variation of this 10 times. And that's it. That's on average. There were Titan Legions that were like 250. There were Titan battles between 2 legions where both sides were firing, 250 at each other. We actually talked about one in one of our Horus Heresy episodes where it's essentially just this entire planet was this entire region of a planet was completely decimated because 2 Titan Legions were fighting each other.
And different Forge Worlds would field different complements of Titans. Like that was like the standard, but some were known for different tactics. Some used like a lot of Warhounds because they were fast and mobile. Others like to slug it out with the big boy. If you're interested in playing this, there's the game Abductus Titanicus. I don't know if that's going forward still. And it's also being rolled into Legions Imperialis on the 8mm scale.
Yeah.
And the new supplement coming out it's all about Mechanicum, but it's also about fielding Knight and Titan only armies.
Which looks really cool.
Yeah, I'm going to start building more of these.
Super down into doing that, right? The epic scale. Each Forge World of the Mechanicus also operated several legions of Scutari. Each legion is divided into a minimum of 4 macroclades, each of which is then broken into 4 cohorts, each consisting of 3 mana pools. A mana pool comprises roughly 30 Scutari warriors, 2 Sidonian cavalry units, and 1 Dune crawler. This totals 1,440 infantry, 96 heavy cavalry, and 48 armored units. And that's 1 legion. And almost every single time they bring up the Scutari, it's like so-and-so, Forge Master Maximum Girth had 17 Scutari legions at his disposal. So they never bring up, and I just made up Maximum Girth. That was a joke.
There is a commander, I think.
Of course there is.
Maximus Dickus.
Maximus Dickus, right? Biggest Dickus.
No, I'm serious. You could look it up.
I'm not surprised, but like these guys are not commanding 1 legion; they're commanding legions.
And in some of the books, first of all, The Skitarii can be as big as a Space Marine.
Yeah, and they're more powerful than an Imperial army soldier.
Yes.
The important takeaway is that they shred
Yeah.
guardsmen.
And there is a question about whether or not they can shred Space Marines. And of course,
Yes.
the Skitarii, the ones that are still enough there that haven't been completely lobotomized, are completely confident that they can take Space Marines. And if you read some of the literature, they are profoundly scary in
Yeah.
some of the Black Library books.
Their weapons are insane, and the way that their force is designed is it's designed around this like holy number of 12, and it's designed to specifically meet any need that not the Skitarii, that the tech priest might have.
Yeah.
So instead of
even
having
the tech priest could take out hordes of orcs.
right,
Maybe
yeah,
not
oh, yeah.
hordes, but a large amount. And a
Yeah,
tech
like
priest
50.
is not like combat optimized.
No,
These guys are combat optimized.
and they're optimized not only individually, but they're optimized as the unit that they fight with.
Yeah.
And it's not so the Space Marine legions, to go back to it, each legion had a specific job that they were good at. The Skitarii are good at all jobs. Now there may not be, what is the master of Jack of all trades, master of none. I can't remember the full saying, but like the full saying is not if you're a jack of all trades, you're bad. It's literally like, no, you're doing pretty good. You're pretty level at everything, which is a pretty good place to be.
They aren't necessarily very good at improvising.
No.
They're like downloading battle tactics from the newest sphere.
Yeah.
I've never seen this before. Downloading, going into a boot loop.
It's that scene in The Matrix where Neo is like, I need to know how to fly a helicopter.
Yeah.
The Skitarii also didn't go into war alone. They often went into war alongside the Vascaliaths of the Centurio Ordinatus, which are just these massive fucking artillery units.
Mm-hmm.
And the robots of the Legio Cybernetica.
Yeah.
The Legio Cybernetica is one of the oldest sub-branches of the Mechanicum, and it's thrown into the Skitarii area, but it's not really, there just isn't a fourth branch, essentially. But the Legio Cybernetica essentially are like the bodyguards of the tech priests. And during the heresy, there were several thousand active cohorts that existed alongside the Skitarii or were in direct command of very high-level tech priests.
And some of them were much more independent than they are in 40k.
Yes. And
they can operate more independently, smarter.
Yeah. And each of these several thousand active cohorts had around 100 battle automata. And a battle automata does not mean like an AI Space Marine. They're like 4 times the size. No, they may even be larger. They're huge. No, I guess they're about twice the size of us. The smallest of the Legio Cybernetica are about twice the size of a Space Marine. The largest are about 4 times the size. And the largest ones are the big artillery guys, the big boys with like dark cannons and shit on their shoulders. And the giant chain weapons that you're like, that's scary. They're not small boys. There's one right there.
Yep.
So next up, we have the Tagmata Omnissiah, or in Low Gothic, that which is divinely ordered for war. This is the third arm of the Mechanicum armed forces during this era. It was a feudal military organization and acted in times of war and urgency, representing the power that each forged world could muster in times of battle. This feudalized command was necessary as, at the time of the heresy, each forged world of the Mechanicum was a kingdom unto itself, with its own complex hierarchies and traditions.
By the way,
yeah,
if you guys are watching on Patreon, there's a picture of it. Do you know what Forge World that belongs to?
That's the one that you're wanting to do.
Yeah, that's Xana too.
Yep.
That we've been talking about. These were, I think, the scariest. And these were you talk about like feudalized command or whatever. And I think these were some of the scariest units.
Oh yeah. Well, and they're also, we don't have numbers of how big the Tagmata was, because the Tagmata was literally, we're going to war, we're drafting 25% of our population.
So if you play the game that's shown up above, which is Age of Darkness, which is the Horus Heresy game, you do not have any Skitarii troops.
Yeah, you're playing Tagmata.
You're only playing Tagmata.
Skitarii during the Heresy were the elite troops of essentially the Mechanicum. When the Skitarii came out, things were bad.
Yeah.
Essentially.
What was in the Mechanicum in the Mars Revolt book? You had Rue 230 something, or do you remember?
Yeah,
You read the book.
Yeah, and the Schism there is one Skitarii character in it, and he's like a single operator. I think is he a Dune? No, he's not a Dune
isn't he
crawler.
the one that he is
Rust Stalker.
he is with the girl that goes into
Yeah.
the
Yeah, the one
he's
that,
like his designation is like, are you
God, man, you're making me
235 or something like that.
Oh my God. Are you 23? Are you?
Could be.
I know. I'm blanking on his name, but yeah. And he's the only, I think he's the only Skitarii character in the entire book.
Well, they've got other Skitarii, but they don't.
He's the only one that matters.
Yeah. Are
yeah.
you Mu 31?
There you go. Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
Here's a Skitarii protector. Oh, it actually designated his entire squad. So Are you Mu 31 was a collective of 6 protectors.
Yeah, I was going to say an entire squad of Skitarii could be between I would say between 10 and 20. Oh no, because he's not a rust stalker, and the infiltrator guys, which operate in units of 6 or 12. So the Tagmata was the army, if you want, and the Skitarii were the special forces. And even at that point, most Forge Worlds or most tech priests, and not most Forge Worlds, most tech priests had at least a legion of Skitarii. If you're a high enough level of tech priest, you have a legion of Skitarii dedicated to you. And if you're at a high enough level, you might have 5 or 6 legions of Skitarii dedicated to you. So let's say there's 70 high level tech priests on a Forge World. Just start multiplying that 144, that 1,444 by and you kind of get the idea how many Skitarii. The Tagmata, there's just even more guys. Because in this point, it's militant tech priests, cybernetica, knights, combat servitors, thalocs, midions, tech thralls, ordinatus engines, and a wide variety of other miscellaneous forces that were at a Forge World's disposal. And here is the clincher on Tagmata forces and their size. The Mechanicum never counts servitors as being real. So not being as being a number that counts towards force disposition. So let's just say that you have 130,000 guys in your Tagmata Omnissiah. Not guys, like full on, that's it. Your tech priests, your cybernetica, your knights, everything. It equals 130,000. There's 130,000 individual fighting units in that group. Let's just say 50% are supported by 2 servitors. So it's not 130,000 bodies. It's 390,000 bodies, because those servitors in a combat scenario are still shooting guns. So it kind of starts to paint another picture. And of course, this is without getting into the fact that the Mechanicum had all of these weird one-off things, one-off army forces. There's the famous one that if you're with us on Patreon right now, if you want to join us on Patreon, you can see the picture.
By the way,
yeah, I'll send this to you. It's got the essentially walking. It's not an Arc Mechanicus. It's like a walking battle barge, and then all of the weird things that this group had. And I cannot. It's the Legiones Astartes of Cambria, and I don't remember if this is. I want to say this is based on something that's written down in one of the official books, but this could be an amalgamation, fan-made amalgamation. But yeah, there's just weird one. The point is there is weird one-off Mechanicus shit everywhere, including giant mechanical worms that are capable of devouring entire planets and shooting sunbeam laser cannons. Those things
I've got the picture, so don't worry.
Okay. Those things are just out there. The Mechanicum just has weird one-offs. Yeah. Kind of connected to everything we talked about, but not officially underneath the umbrella of the Mechanicum, are the knight households. I mean, so you have a knight household, right?
Yeah.
I've got a knight household. But give us a little bit of a rundown before I jump into like what the households were. Can you kind of describe a knight?
Okay, a knight is it's a towering mech. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. One person usually? Yeah, they're all
Always
one
one person. They sit on a throne control, which they are like hooked into the brain. And the knight also keeps the memories of all its pilots before then. And when you get accepted by the knight, the machine spirit of the knight sort of like interfaces with you, and your personality changes a little bit to match the personality of the knight you're piloting. And each knight has a different personality. They can be aggressive, they can be less aggressive, they can be strategic, they can be all this.
A warhound is 56 feet tall. A knight is 35 feet tall,
Yeah. So it's about 3/4 or so
roughly.
roughly the size of I believe a 40k knight sits about the Questoris knight, which is the picture that's on the screen if you see it, but that's a typical knight, stands about 7.5 to 8 inches tall.
Yeah, and that one would be like the 35-foot tall. There are
Yeah.
taller knights.
Yeah. So
Um,
you get up to the biggest one, which is
it's about 40 feet tall, so just about 16 feet shorter.
how do you say that? Pro,
Porphyrion.
Profurion, which you gave me, which I have not put together. Those are almost Titan class.
Yeah, the Porphyrion is almost a Warhound Titan. It's about 16 feet shorter than one, essentially.
Yeah, and it's more heavily armed than a
Yeah.
Warhound Titan. So, and the castigators are these like long limbed ones. They're taller. Then they've got like little tiny ones that are the war dogs. But basically, if you watch anime and you see giant mech robos, that's what these are, except they run on
Yeah,
diesel.
yeah. They're diesel punk mech, anime mechs essentially.
And they've got like giant chainsaws on their arms. This is
Yeah.
because the lore is that these were basically construction robots that were then retrofitted with. They've got all these removable armor plates, but the armor plates wouldn't have been on there at the beginning. It just would have been the skeleton. And they would have had just regular hands, or maybe they had a chainsaw to cut down lumber or clear fields. And then as threats appeared, these armor plates started to be grafted on, and weapons were fitted, and they became engines of war. And they're called knights because their pilots basically became the ruling class.
Yeah, it's a very feudalistic society.
Basically, once you're in one of these things and it's influencing the way you think by everybody else that has been sitting in it before you, you become in your mind better than everyone else, and it's your right to rule them. And
Yeah.
they do. So they come from feudal planets where they're the ruling class and the protectors. And they are either pledged to the Mechanicum, or they're pledged to the Imperium. So they either
Questoris, Mechanicus, and what is the Imperial? Questoris Imperialis.
Imperialis. Yeah. So you either follow the Emperor or you follow the Mechanicum. And in reality, it doesn't really change much, except that the ones that you pledge yourself to the Mechanicum are usually tied directly to a Forge world and are like vassals of the Forge world and possibly vassals of a Titan Legion.
And then as Chac was mentioning earlier in the episode, during the Age of Strife, the Mechanicum continued to send out essentially these like generation ships. A lot of them were knight ships. And as these knight ships reached worlds, they founded these feudal, essentially, like, so everybody on a knight world that isn't in the knight family is essentially like medieval peasants. Like,
Yeah.
and we're not saying
We're not saying
relativistically
serfs or anything.
these
We're
are
saying
literally
peasants.
guys who are wandering around. They might have one flushing toilet and one house with power in the village. Like it's that, like everyone essentially
But some
lives
of
like
them are
medieval people.
logical. I mean, there are night worlds that have hives on them. So
it does run the gambit, but a lot of night worlds
or agricultural
worlds. Yeah. And by the time of the heresy, there were thousands of night worlds that had been found and reunited. And of course, they split themselves between the traitors and the loyalists. And just like Chalk mentioned with the Titans earlier, knights don't go into battle alone. Knights go into battle with their household men at arms. And again, this is essentially a planetary defense force.
I think one of the funniest parts is that if you go back to when knights were first introduced,
Right.
which was in the Epic game, the knights force would include cavalry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like literally horses.
Literally cavalry, literally guys on horses with spears.
And if you listened to my homebrew system, which is the Skaldmar World's House Castica, which is my knight household, they use basically heavy motorcycles. Their cavalry uses heavy motorcycles.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one step up from horses, realistically.
Yeah.
Like,
so, and my household, which is basically sort of Arthurian based, we have the Red Shanks, which are the mercenaries. They're called the Red Shanks because their lower legs are dyed red with the blood of their enemies.
nice.
And they ride. What are the scout mechs from the Imperial Guard?
Imperial Scouts.
No, but they've got the two-legged walkers that look like the ATSTs.
Yeah, Imperial Scouts.
Imperial Scouts. That's what they ride as their horses.
I think they're called Imperial Scouts. I got a bunch of them. Are they called Imperial Scouts?
I don't know.
I mean, it doesn't sound like, as soon as I like stuck to my guns, I'm like, that doesn't sound right.
These
Sentinels. Imperial Sentinels. There we go.
Okay, so that's a small one.
Yeah.
But there you go.
They're pretty, I like that. That's pretty cool. We'll have to do like a night household episode where we each talk more in depth about our night households, because I figured out a bunch of my men at arms stuff. And like what my night households are, anyway, we'll get into it later. Not the time.
Yeah.
So next up, and we kind of brought up knights out of order a little bit here, but next up inside the Sol system itself, right after he had to deal with the Mechanicum, the Emperor would encounter the rest of humanity that had fortified Sol system's outer planets. Chief among these were the naval ships of Jupiter and Saturn and the forces that would become known as the Solar Auxilia. This was an elite fighting force within the Imperial army during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. They were amongst the Emperor's most disciplined and well-equipped fighting forces, widely considered by many second only to the Legiones Astartes in their military effectiveness in battle. Solar Auxilia soldiers were not only trained as infantrymen, but also trained in space combat, combat engineering, planetary exploration, and Death World survival missions. By the 2nd century of the Great Crusade, the Solar Auxilia comprised 20 to 25% of the Imperial army. When the Horus Heresy erupted, the Solar Auxilia became a key asset to the Loyalist forces. However, while they were strongly loyal overall, there are several examples of rebellious ones against Imperial rule. Most notably are the Chthonian headhunters, which had close connections to War Master Horus.
Basically, each legion. So there were a bunch of like sort of independent Solar Auxiliary cohorts.
Yes.
But also each legion usually traveled with a cohort, often from their home planet.
Yeah. So each legion had a Solar Auxilia cohort.
And often, and now that is actually, as the Legions Imperialis games and the Dark Age games events, that's been written in. So, and when a legion turned traitor, its Solar Auxiliary often went with it. So, for example, with me for the Iron Warriors, we were talking about the Seleucid Thoracite.
Yeah.
Turned traitor. They went along with them.
Yeah, and the Chthonian headhunters would have been the Luna Wolves ones.
Yeah. The Dark Angels had their own. They were like the Calibanite Hussars were the ones that rode the tanks or whatever. So now it's pretty much been made canon that each legion had its own group of Solar Auxilia that were closely tied to it, and that they would go, if the legion went traitor, they would go traitor.
So the reason that this happened was that what separates a Solar Auxilia trooper from an Imperial Army trooper is training and equipment.
Yeah.
They have better equipment. They have void stabilized equipment. They have just better guns and better guns and armor in general, better training in general. And again, as Chac mentioned, a lot of times some connection closely to the Legion that they were part of.
Yeah.
Now, what separates the fact that the majority stayed loyal, because now we kind of have to talk about that, is that there was, as the name suggests, the Solar Auxilia, being one of the Solar Auxilia groups from the Sol system. There was also the Luna Auxilia, which was another Solar Auxilia regiment of Solar Auxilia from the Sol system. And then a lot of times different systems would have their own. So like pick a system. The Sabbat worlds probably had the Sabbat Solar Auxilia as an example. So these are Solar Auxilia that are directly tied to the Emperor and his control, or the War Council and their control, or to Dorn, depending on which level you're looking at, or Gilliman, depending on which level you're looking at, rather than being tied to the Legion specifically. They are tied to the military of the Imperium. And so you had like guys, by and large, stayed loyal.
So there was the famous, the attack on Port, I want to say Port Arthur.
Port Maul.
Port Maul, yeah. So that was basically that. Within that system, you had the Lord Marshal's Own, which was a Solar Auxiliary cohort. They stayed loyal. They basically, you had like the governor of the system was like going over to Chaos, or not, going over to not Chaos, but the War Master, and he said no. And so he gathered up his veterans and he gathered up his cohort and basically took over the system.
Yep.
And that's why they became known as the Lord Marshal's Own. And they defended the system. They stayed loyal to the Emperor. And this happened all over the place. Yeah. But you also had ones that turned traitor.
Yeah.
And maybe half and half also. Maybe some of them broke up. But the whole thing is that the Solar Auxilia were rated as just like, they were just a notch below the Space Marines. They didn't wear power armor.
Yeah.
And they weren't transhuman monsters. But as far as discipline, training, and equipment, they were right up there.
And some of them were gene warriors.
Some were.
There's a couple of famous examples. And the Geno 22, the Kiliad, the Geno Kiliad, crap. The Geno Warriors of the Kiliad 22nd. There we go.
That's not the 22nd. Oh, now it's going to get me.
Yeah, okay. You fact check me. There's so many organizations we've talked about. But
read the
Kiliad,
Alpha Legion book. It is great.
Yeah. The Kiliad are pretty cool. The Geno 27. That's what I was thinking of.
Geno 27 Kiliad.
The main takeaway is of the Solar Auxilia, 75% stayed loyal. To throw a number, and we're making that up. We're guessing 75% stayed loyal. At least 9 cohorts turned evil. We know that.
Yeah.
There were roughly 10,000 Solar Auxilia cohorts during the last years of the Great Crusade, and each side after the heresy would raise more. So that's another thing. Even after the heresy started, the Chthonian headhunters started as one cohort, but Horus wants more. So maybe there's 4 cohorts of the Chthonian headhunters, stuff like that. Each would muster a nominal fighting force of 120,000 individuals, with several thousand more in support staff and in other roles. Each cohort fell under the command of a Marshal Solar, not directly. The Marshal Solar would fall under direct command of a Primarch. But as Chac just brought up, that Marshal Solar decided that they didn't like what the Primarch was doing, they might turn because they're going to be loyal.
And that's what the Lord Marshal's Own. The Marshal Solar.
All right. The big boys. And by the big boys, I mean by and far the largest contingent we're going to talk about. The Imperial Army and the Imperial Navy. The indentured troops of the Imperial Army were assimilated into the command structure of the Space Marine Legions. They fell under the direct authority of the Primarchs of each Imperial Expeditionary Fleet and his subordinate Space Marine officers. So in the case where it was a secondary fleet that was doing it, whoever that secondary fleet reported to, those soldiers reported to that Primarch. Later on, a Space Marine transport would arrive on each world and carry the regiments of the Imperial Army raised there as part of the Imperial tithe. In this bygone era, the Imperial Army and Imperial Fleet, or Armada Imperialis, functioned as a single entity, with the army commanders exercising overall command of both elements. So the army officer was in control. The Lord Commander is an army position, and he is in charge of both. They are in charge of both the ground troops and the Navy. Now, the
And
Navy...
that's not true anymore.
That's not true anymore. The XO of the Navy, the master of the fleet, is his second in command, essentially.
Yeah.
The regimental formation and overall structure of the ground-based units of the Imperial Army was very similar to that of the present-day Astra Militarum. The size of an Imperial Army regiment was dictated by what would fit into the interstellar ships available at the time. Most Imperial Army regiments numbered approximately 3,000 troops, who would be carried to their destination by a single dedicated troop transport vessel or one of the many available classes of Imperial cruisers. Now, to hedge their bets, there wasn't one of these transports in an Imperial fleet. There were several, like dozens. So again, 3,000 times 12.
Yeah.
Each regiment maintained its own infantry, armor, and support troops, making it capable of assaulting and defending on varied terrain against most types of opposition. Imperial Army regimental commanders were free to train and equip their regiments as they wished, but they were limited by the resources available to them at the time. So you might want an entire tank division. You might not get an entire tank division.
Yeah.
It depends on what the Imperium has available. And these guys, by and large, sided with their loyalist or traitor Primarchs, like almost whole hog. And there are cases of entire regiments being raised and not being attached to a Primarch, or being so far removed that it's essentially functionally they are not attached. And those guys went one way or the other. And then there's also, planetary, which we haven't even talked about. Imperial Army was raised out of, so each planet, man, okay, I'm going to try to do this quickly. Each planet taken over in the Great Crusade was tasked with creating a planetary defense force. That planetary defense force is responsible for defending that planet. Out of that planetary defense force, the PDF, the best of the best became the Imperial Army regiments. And nowadays in 40k, the best of the best become Imperial Guardsmen. That doesn't mean that that's the entire force. So if a planet's governor went traitor, and that say that planetary defense force is, I don't even know how you would calculate the number of armed forces in the world currently. But again, every nation in the world combine their military force. That's the planetary defense. So you're talking about, like, I don't know, maybe let's say 500 million soldiers in a planetary defense force, right? Like, and that's probably a small number. I mean, so you're playing with just like mind-numbingly large numbers. And when the traders rolled in, they might just, when Horus rolls in, he might just go, give me all 500 million of your planetary defense force guys. Those are now my army, because I don't care if they die. Very legitimately, logistically, the traders just threw bodies at the problem. And that could just be what happens. They all get whipped up.
And so you could think, PDF, is like the regular army. I've heard, to varying levels, Imperial Guard are like special forces. They were the best of the best. They had more training. They had better weapons and all. I don't know if I really believe that. It depends on the...
I think the PDF is the National Guard.
Yeah. But I told you, I've heard this from other creators. I don't really buy it because I don't. So if you read the books, some of those regiments that you read about in the books are like the equivalent of the special forces. I don't think the vast majority of the Imperial Guard that don't get books written about them are at that level.
If you're an Imperial Guard regiment and you get a book written about you, you're probably special.
Yeah, if you're one of the Gaunt's ghosts, you are special forces. If you are the levy that's raised from Buttfuck 3-2, you don't get a book written about you, and you're probably nothing special.
I think the Jassarians in this Sabbat Wars, I think they're the Jassarians. I might be conflating real history names with 40k names.
The Janissaries?
Not the Janissaries, but that's why I'm pretty sure that they're from the. But anyway, in the Sabbat world, books, which are the primary antagonists of that the primary protagonists of that are Gaunt's ghosts.
Yeah.
But they fight with a lot of other Imperial Guard units. They're around a lot of other Imperial Guard
Mhm.
units. At one point, I want to say there's a couple of officers talking, and the number that's thrown out specifically in that Dan Abnett book is that about 10% of a planetary defense force matches the requirements to be an Imperial Guardsman. So it's the top 10% of a planetary defense force that makes it. So if you were to say, take our modern, we'll go back to our modern world. If you were to take the top 10% of soldiers in our modern world, that would be our Imperial Guard regiment, whatever that means, which is chalk, as you just mentioned, it's probably the people in special forces, and then it's probably the top 2% or 5% or whatever of every military unit in general.
Yeah.
Every guy in the Army, every guy in the Marine Corps, every guy in the Air
Yeah,
Force. Blah, blah,
that's
blah,
I
blah.
mean, they are that's why they're, sort of gone like they're more like the special forces. If you thought that if the PDF was good enough to be the regular army, the Guard would be like the equivalent of the special forces. They're basically the cream.
Yeah.
We're
Well,
not
in a
talking
planet,
we're not talking about like everybody is like Navy SEAL, Delta Ranger,
right,
Foxtrot, Echo, whatever.
right.
Make up your my rank is classified and my MOS is classified, dude.
I'm a counter sniper.
Yeah, exactly.
The main point, I get the main thing that separates the planetary defense force from the Imperial Army and now the Astra Militarum is that a planetary defense force, in theory, never leaves the
The
planet.
planet and
So
is
if the
governed and is led by the governor.
Yeah. So if the planet is never attacked, like for instance, Arconia, the planet that we created, that we play around with in our own homebrew, our own podcast homebrew lore, Arconia has not been attacked in like 5,000 or 6,000 years.
And so they're probably all ceremonial.
Yeah. So the Planetary Defense Force probably did. It's largely a training ground to separate who's worthy of being an Imperial Guardsman and getting sent off world. And that's kind of just, it's not that they're useless. It's that being in the Planetary Defense Force is the good part of being part of the Imperial Army. Because you might never fight.
And if your planet is always being attacked by Eldari raiders,
it could be
or
way worse.
orcs or whatever, they could be a lot more competent.
And I was going to say a great example of this is Catachan. Catachan does not have a PDF. Catachan has an Imperial Guard regiments. Nobody on Catachan is considered Planetary Defense Force. They are all considered Imperial Guard.
Cadia.
Yeah. Cadia. Another great example. Everybody on Cadia is an Imperial Guardsman. I mean, everybody on those like 8 asteroids.
Well, yeah. Before the 13th Black Crusade.
Everybody on Cadia was. So before we jump into the talents of the Emperor, I'm going to let you do it in a second. But since we're talking about Imperial Army, I'm just going to throw Imperial Navy in there. It was really hard to find any exact numbers on the number of ships in the Imperial Navy's fleet. And this would be, of course, part of the Imperial Army at this point. The Imperial Navy is now, as Chac mentioned, is now a separate entity. The Navy and the Astra Militarum are two different organizations for a reason. Which we already talked about. Basically, don't give all the power to one guy, or the one guy might go against your boss. But what we know, for example, is that certain expeditionary fleets did list their number of ships. So the World Eater's Bloody 13th had about 1,444 ships. But we also know that it was on the bigger side. We also know, and this is just, we're trying to extrapolate numbers here. We're trying to give you guys an idea of how many Navy ships there are. By the time of the Siege of Terra, some 100,000 trader ships had gathered to lay siege to the Sol system, which suggests that there were probably several hundred thousands that opposed them. And then who knows how many were lost in the 7 years or so that it took Horus to actually move from the Istvan system to Terra. So like if 100,000 traders and 100,000 loyalists, we'll just say, if there are 200,000 ships in orbit of Terra during the siege, 100,000 on each side, how many were in Sol system? How many were in the core worlds? How many? There are probably hundreds of millions of Imperial Navy ships on the low end, and probably a couple of billion on the high end. Maybe maybe tens of billions on the high end, let's say. I feel that that's probably about the numbers we're talking about, right? You know,
Yeah, pretty much.
it gotta be. And like, of course, this goes everything from like a 2-seat gun cutter to a battle barge. So, you know, size, we're not doing a reflection of size, but at the end of the day, the point is, if there are only 4.4 million Marines,
Hmm.
and there are hundreds of millions of naval vessels, you get an idea of the fact that
Yeah.
like the Marines they're not that many of them. But let's finish on the Talons of the Emperor. I'm
Okay.
gonna let you take it away.
Okay. So the Talons of the Emperor were named after the two groups. You had the Emperor's bodyguards, which were the Adeptus Custodes, which we have talked about before on here, and we'll talk about again.
Oh yeah.
And the Sisters of Silence, or the Null Sisters. Now they are the
The Astra something, right?
Astra Sinister. I can't remember. So basically, they're a very specialized unit. So as we've said before, but a quick rundown: Custodes are not fancy space marines. Space marines are grown by implanting gene seeds and all these extra organs and grafting bits and bobs on, and basically shoving an extra half guy into somebody's torso. They've got like two hearts and
Yeah, they got 4 sets of
extra
yeah, I got you.
lungs
You're
and all
right.
that.
Take a half of a
Custodes,
dude.
yeah. Custodes are gene engineered from the ground up. They aren't made from gene seed. They don't have extra organs. They are just better than us in every way. They're also larger than Space Marines, stronger than Space Marines, probably more intelligent, probably everything. They're better. They were originally developed to,
Anathema Psychana is their
yeah,
new name.
Anathema Psychana. So basically, they are the anti-psychers.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
So the Custodes were originally developed to be the Emperor's bodyguard, and they were the ones, along with the Dark Angels, who killed off the Thunder Warriors. So they one of their purposes, as have been told in the 40k Custodes books, is they are the predators of the Space Marine.
Yeah, they're there to call the Space Marines
Yeah.
at this. Yeah.
They are there to take out the Space Marines. As a matter of fact, if somebody took out one of either the 2nd or the 11th Legion, I would say the 11th Legion, it would not have been the Space Wolves. They already said they didn't. It would be probably the Custodes.
We all know that the second was taken out by the Rangdang.
The 2nd are lost,
because of the
and the
Rangdang.
11th fell.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah, we'll
yeah.
get into that.
We'll get into
2nd
it.
is my baby. I like the 2nd. They are just lost in the warp.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the Custodes they weren't just the Emperor's bodyguard. They did go with the Emperor. So when the Emperor was leading a crusade fleet, the Custodes were with him.
Yeah.
And the Sisters of Silence they're all nulls. They're called the Null Maidens. They're also called the Silence because they don't speak. But they are blanks or nulls, so psychic powers don't affect them.
Yeah.
And because Custodes are not psychically active at all. It's not like they're nulls. They're just
They're
regular people. They don't have
Yeah.
psychers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's the difference between not having any magical ability and your magic ability being counterspell.
Right. Yeah. So and they can never develop psychers because, like I said, they are gene engineered from the ground up, and the Emperor made sure that they do not have the psychic gene.
Yeah.
So they are taken as children from noble families on Terra and subjected to gene therapy. Think, if you know any science these days, think CRISPR technology.
Yeah.
So their genes their genetic code is modified at the base level, and they grow into these 10-foot.
Yeah, they're pretty. I think they're a little bit bigger than Space Marines.
Yeah, they're a little bit bigger than Space Marines, bigger than Primaris Space Marines, but not as big as Primarchs. They are also, they're the warrior poets. They are the special forces. They are the epitome of the military forces of the Emperor. And there are 10,000 of them. I don't know if there were more during the Crusade.
They're close to 9 Terran feet in height.
Okay. Primarchs start at like 10 feet.
Yeah, Primarchs. So Space Marines, humans, Space Marines, Primaris, Custodes, Primarchs, Emperor.
We
And
don't know how big the emperor is because nobody's ever seen his actual height.
that's true because he never shows what he actually
And
looks
he's
like.
had children, so does he, like, shrink down? Does he I'm not getting into that question.
It's Zeus, dude.
Um, but the Sisters of Silence and the Custodes work in tandem. They work
Yes.
best together. And when the Sisters of Silence were basically after the Crusades, when they were exiled, there was a hole in the Custodes' ability to operate. And they knew something was wrong, and it wasn't until they were reunited with Gilliman that they found out that they were really designed to work with the Sisters of Silence.
Yeah, if you don't
And we don't know if that
have
was by plan.
yeah. But it makes sense that it would be because, like, if you don't have any casters, like, if your entire order doesn't have any magical casters, doesn't have any magic users,
Mhm.
you've got in a universe that has magic, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
So it only makes sense that they would function with a group that specifically made sure that the other side's magic couldn't work, essentially.
So basically, the Custodes were the peak of transhuman, gene modified, guided evolution of a human, whereas the Sisters of Silence are at the peak physicality of a standard human,
But with the psychic abilities
but
just
with the psychic,
massively
but also
heightened.
being psychic nulls.
And the psychic ability that they have that's maxed out is counterspell.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like walking anti cat circle of protection magic if
Yeah.
you want to look at it in a
And
D&D way.
they kept up throughout. The only Sisters of Silence that kept going throughout up until when Gilliman returned were those that manned the black ships that would collect psychers.
Yeah, worked with the Inquisition.
But the actual military force sort of went away. In modern times, it's seen that the Custodes were only bodyguards and they stayed on Terra. In actuality, they had these small strike groups that would go out. It's sort of like, you know how when somebody, okay, these days, the Secret Service just doesn't stay around the president.
Well,
If there's a threat that comes against the president, they will go out and knock on the door and say, "Excuse me, sir, we would like to talk to you about these threatening messages that you sent." If the Custodes throughout 30K up into 40K, they had a big intelligence network. If they found they wouldn't go knock on the door if they perceived a threat to the emperor. There would be a strike force of like 1 to 5 Custodes would descend on a planet and take out the threat.
yeah.
So they were
It's
operating in the Greater Imperium since 8th edition.
they just weren't operating as a military.
As a military, they were like independent operators, small battle groups, very clandestine. But if you have a tabletop army, they were out there fighting.
You put it great that the Secret Service. So the Secret Service doesn't just protect. I mean, well, at all the Secret Service does two jobs. They protect the president and they make sure that money isn't being
Yes.
counterfeited. And the reason is because a bunch of counterfeiters tried to steal Abraham Lincoln's corpse.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why we have a Secret Service. I'm sure there's a podcast that describes exactly how that got founded
Yeah.
if you want to know more information. But essentially, yeah, as soon as the emperor was a corpse, the corpse emperor, the majority of the Custodes stay on Earth or stayed on Terra because they were protecting him and his
The
body.
corpse.
But there is a percentage that's always going to operate as a strike force. And I've told this joke before. My big-ish problem with the Custodes on tabletop is that the Custodes are now fielded as like, I mean, I guess it's still pretty small in comparison. You'll have like 25 guys, but it feels like an army, and I don't think they were intended to be an army. I think they have a place in Kill Team. I don't know
I
if
think
they
they're
have a
probably better,
place.
but in Kill Team they should only have one.
Yeah, exactly.
But they were Gilliman is fielding them as a force now, but they were a tabletop army back in 8th.
Yeah, they've been a tabletop army since 7th, I think.
7th? I thought it was
Yeah.
8th. But
Maybe
anyway,
it was 8th.
in 30K, which is what we're talking about, they were very much a military force.
Yeah, well, and part of it is because the emperor was out doing stuff, one, and the second part was the emperor was giving them orders. As soon
Yeah.
as the guy who gives you orders doesn't give you orders anymore, it all kind of falls apart.
And then you end up in a pocket dimension making faux angels and Yeah.
And when that final book comes out. So to round out the talents of the Emperor, we also had the Officio Assassinorum, which was being run by Malcador the Sigillite, was the Grandmaster, the first Grandmaster of the Officio Assassinorum. And if you know any of the Imperial Assassins, these are the guys, there are like 12 houses, but there are 4 that everybody's really familiar with, which are Calexis,
Evisor,
which are
Calexis. Evisor are the
combat monsters that are put asleep
Right.
unless they're given a target.
Then you've got the snipers, which are the got one right there. Not painted, of course. Why would I paint any of my models?
Okay, so the houses are the Calidus Temple,
Okay, they can shape change.
which are the shape changers.
Okay,
There is the Calexis Temple, which are the anti-psychers.
right.
There is the Vindicar Temple, which are the snipers.
They're the snipers.
And then there's the Evisor, which are like literally like the Evisor guys are
Which
so
ones take the polyjuice? Okay, no, that's not what it is. It's the polymorph potion. It's the same thing. It's Harry Potter stuff.
It's the Calidus. It's the shapeshifter guys.
The what?
I am not mispronouncing it, sir. It's the Calexis and the Calidus, I'm pretty sure. How would you pronounce that? Yeah.
I don't know. Most men can't find them.
Calidus. I mean, if you want me to, yeah, right. If you want me to be really pedantic, it's Calidus, but I'm pretty sure it's Calidus because it's Idus. Calidus.
Oh, there are too many jokes there.
Yeah. But yeah, so the Eversors are the guys that are so the Calidus take potions and change their shape. Calexis basically have this big it's like a focusing null beam. It can turn a psyker. It can turn a psyker inside out, essentially.
Yeah.
The Vindicar are really, really good at planning out their shots and taking their shots. They're the snipers, and the Evisor are so combat juiced that they are in.
They're the ones where get the whole 5 Space Marines could take out a planet. No, you
one Evisor can
one of these guys on a planet and crack a stasis capsule and it's over.
Thank you, stasis capsule. Yeah, they're disgusting. And then there's even stranger things that Malcador and the Emperor had access to, including the tech arcanists of the Templi Chronos and the dread Psi Titans of the Ordo Sinister.
I've got one of those.
So yeah, there's all sorts of crazy stuff.
And let's not forget the Grey Shields.
The
Grey Shields force, which was directly under Malkadite, that they did some hinky stuff too. Those were the real
the Knights
were like the OSS.
The Knights Errant.
Yeah, the Knights Errant.
Who would become the Grey Knights.
And which we have done a show on a couple back.
Yeah. And then of course there was all of the one-off specialty units that either fought in the Unification War. I think they're called the Old 100. They're 100.
That's where the
Chiliad 27. Yeah.
Yeah, the Old 100, they were mostly a lot of gene modified. They fought with the Emperor.
Very specialized soldiers that would be sent out to do specialized jobs by the Emperor.
Yeah,
usually
another one
using
is the black. Oh, the something blacks. The
oh my gosh, the Justicarian blacks.
No,
they're all over the Beast Arises.
Yes, but they're just
Lucifer
ceremonial
blacks,
now.
The Lucifer blacks.
If you go back to,
they were the pinnacle Imperial Army regiment of the Great Crusade, not the Great Crusade, the Unification Wars.
Yeah,
they were.
Read Legion.
Yeah, good
it's
book.
The Alpha Legion book. It has almost no Alpha Legion in it. It is almost all about the old 100s.
Yeah,
it's weird, but it is. Yeah, the Lucifer Blacks.
Yeah, Lucifer Blacks. But yeah, and
Geno 25 Chiliad. The Lucifer Blacks aren't listed in this one. Notable.
The Lucifer. I don't think the Lucifer Blacks were one of the preeminent, but I don't think they were part of the old 100.
Okay. I like the Jokers.
We called them the Nutty Jays in the Hive. So no, I'm kidding.
No, there was one. They were in the Legion book with the Geno 25, and they were called. Or maybe one of the guys was Joker, or the Jesters.
I'm pretty well. Yeah. Suffice it to say,
there were a lot. Yeah,
there are a lot of just these different notable groups that essentially reported specifically, if you want to say, to the Emperor or directly enough to the Emperor that it doesn't matter. You're splitting. Yeah, sure. They were taking their orders from some dude 3 rungs down, but still. And the main reason that we wanted to cover all this stuff and kind of throw all these, I mean, imaginary numbers at you when we could find imaginary numbers is just, realize the Space Marines are the focus of a lot of the stories because they're the guys in upper command. But we're trying as we go through the heresy to always remind you guys of the other forces that are involved. And we just wanted to kind of lay out all of those forces just kind of down, give them a blanket definition so you had a better understanding. And I think we did a pretty good job.
And we also nerd out on this, as you can see.
Oh yeah.
If you don't know, so Ryan writes a script, obviously, because he's reading a script. I do not have a script. If it comes up, I am just doing this from memory because I have been doing this for an awful, awful long time.
Yeah.
And
When did you
I've
start
just,
playing? What year did you start playing?
I don't know, what year did Rogue Trader come out?
89.
So probably around 90.
Okay, so you've been playing since 90. I've been playing since 92. Drew's been playing since 95. So I think between the three of us, we're already like, if you remember how Mythbusters used to do that thing between the two of them over 70 years in the special effect or whatever it was. Like, I think at that point we've already hit like what, 90 years?
I love it. I get these
90
things.
years.
I sometimes I just stop like responding or looking
Shit,
at
Emmy's been playing for like 10 years at this point too. Yeah, we're
at
over
comments on my
100.
lore videos, and I'm like, I played Space Marine too, and you're wrong.
Yeah. Okay, great. I don't. What does that sentence mean?
And then I Googled something.
Yeah.
It's
I read.
I hate
half,
to tell you guys this, but a lot of stuff before 2000 is not on Google.
Thankfully, that's shrinking. I thankfully there's some good lore sources out there, but it's so to kind of get to the point that Chac's making. When I write the episodes, I verify with 3 sources of information because if I don't have the book in front of me, I verify with 3 sources. If I have the book and if I have the core book in front of me that talks about what we're talking about, I don't have to verify because I have like the written word. It's done. But anything that we talk, any of these side things where we're kind of trying to get, we verify with 3 sources. Any point where we're actually kind of like conjecturing, a lot of this episode was conjecture because a lot of these numbers are not written down anywhere. You kind of have to infer them for things. We're upfront with you. We had to guess. We're estimating these numbers, and sometimes the official numbers don't make sense. So we're trying to estimate on top of that. And yeah, we just we've been doing it for a long time. I get that. That's a good
And
point.
those numbers that we put out is why if Star Trek comes to the 40k universe, they will never win because they just can't kill enough people to do it.
There's just too many people. Well, if you want to get into contact with us about this episode or the show itself, you can do that with email at underthehiveofmadness@gmail.com. If you specifically have complaints, you can write those complaints to who do we throw under the complaint? Is it Drew? Yeah, write them to Drew.
Yeah, write them to Drew. You can write them to Emmy and just don't be rude.
You can also join our growing community on Discord and become part of the conversation about existing lore, world building, gaming, and much more, including, as we've mentioned a couple of times, the fact that we have our own little corner of lore that we call the Carcosan sector that we have been developing out. Find the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, or check out our website, underthehiveofmadness.com. You can check out our link tree, which we have down in the show notes, to keep up with everyone in the cast's hobby progress and any other projects we are working on, whether or not it's 40K related or not.
Help the podcast grow by liking and reviewing us wherever you get your podcast fix. Our home is on Spotify, but you can find us on Audible, Apple Podcasts, where I listen to it, Castbox, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, and more. I'm just kidding. I don't listen to these.
You were part of it.
I used to listen to them. I've listened to everyone up until when I became a permanent host, and now I tend to not listen to them.
And I listened to them like 3 times.
So he makes up for it. As always, links and spellings can be found in our show notes. Support us through Patreon at www.patreon.com/underthehiveofmadness. And join a fantastic crew of hivers for access to extra content and a chance to snag some cool merch in our monthly giveaways. Who was our newest member.
Our newest member is David.
Hey,
and
David, shout out to you. I don't know you. I need to spend more time on the Discord. So, all you guys listening, ping the hell out of me and make me pay attention to the Discord, please. I've got enough going on, and I spend enough time on Discord, but it's not always on ours. So,
what?
so send me shit, okay? Ping me, say hello, do all that crap, and David, hope to meet you. So, like I said, send me a message.
They can't stop our signal no matter how deep underground they chase us or how large the shadow they try to put over us. We are your light of truthiness in the uncertain frosty cold of long nights. 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio. Reminding all of you Chemrats, Hive Mice, and Sump Ghoulies to keep those dials fixed right here. Same ratty frequency for a dose of the same ratty ass attitude.
Is truthiness an actual word?
I mean... Stephen Colbert made it up, okay?
In the Frost Hollows chill, where the light grows thin, the four-armed emperors begin their grim spin. Icy winds hide their steps, their breath on your neck. Stray too far and you'll pay the check. Four claws will drag you through the frost and night, lost in the cold, far from all sight.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we got to do the clap. There we go.
My fraternity actually did that. Or like, yes, I was in a male-dominated, white, horrible fraternity. I have renounced that.
And as always, remember to read a motherfucking book.
Don't loot the corpses.
All right, guys. Thank you.
All right.
Talk to you later.